Alrighty, folks, welcome back to our 145 session, Archives Unmasked, Transforming the Lone Arranger Through Inclusivity and Trust, presented today by Kristen Nitre and Dana Ryerkirk. So Kristen J. Nitre is the Director of the Special Collections and University Archives and University Archivist at Stony Brook University in the United States. And Dana Ryerkirk is the Knowledge Management and Digital Assets Librarian at Stony Brook University, also in the United States. All right, so with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Dana and Christian. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Sure. Oh, snap. Okay. I think I'd be used to this by now, but. Okay, so thank you for attending our presentation today, Archives Unmasked, Transforming the Lone Arranger Through Inclusivity and Trust. I'm Dana Ryerkirk, the Knowledge Management and Digital Assets Librarian here at Stony Brook University Libraries. I am wearing a green shirt, I have purple glasses on and brown hair, and I have a background from Cartoon Network.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Nitre. I'm a tenured faculty librarian with the rank of Associate Librarian and the dual roles of Director of Special Collections and University Archives and University Archivist at Stony Brook University Libraries. I am a certified archivist and have been with Stony Brook for 25 years. I have blonde hair and I am wearing eyeglasses, and my Zoom background is an image from our Special Collections of a Long Island map published in 1858. Next slide, please. So we would like to thank Danielle Nista and the Art Education Committee for the opportunity to participate at today's symposium. Our lightning talk will discuss our experiences over the past 3 years to create new opportunities within existing work structures to produce collaborative projects, services, and research. We titled our presentation, quote, Archives Unmasked, Transforming the Lone Arranger Through Inclusivity and Trust, unquote, to center the importance of inclusivity in dialogues about lone arrangers. Inclusion, or a sense of belonging and being valued, is a critical component of DEIA efforts that receives lesser emphasis in the research literature and in the workplace. So in 2019, Dana was hired in a newly created role for digital asset management. I have been the only librarian and archivist in my department for more than a decade. So in our own unique ways, we both work in a singular or lone role. Dana's position is within library resource management at large. And although we are located within the same collection management division, the administrative and organizational structures do not generally create connections in daily work. So we were assigned as mentor and mentee in 2020. And after communicating in that capacity, we recognized opportunities to transform isolated work and research interests into collaborative initiatives. So today we will describe ways that we have shifted aspects of our respective work from solo endeavors to a self-directed collaboration model and share some outcomes from it.
So Stony Brook University is a flagship institution of the public state University of New York system. Situated on the North Shore of suburban Long Island, SBU is a Carnegie classified R1, doctoral university, and member of the Association of American Universities. SBU is ranked among the top 1% of universities in the world and has about 27,000 students and 2,700 faculty members.
And SBU Libraries is the largest academic research library on Long Island. It is a member of the Association of Research Libraries with a collection exceeding 2 million print volumes. The library is known particularly for extensive print and electronic resources and special collections. In total, there are 8 distinct libraries, and our library faculty and staff are located across campuses in Stony Brook and Southampton, New York.
So our library has a stacked hierarchical structure, and both of our positions are located within the Division of Collection Strategy and Management, which you see here on the screen. However, I'm situated in a separate department from Special Collections and University Archives, and our library collection management work is not inherently collaborative, and historically there's been a lack of interdepartmental workflows. So for example, all cataloging for Kristen's department is handled there rather than in my department.
And Special Collections and University Archives has a leading role in developing and preserving research collections at Stony Brook. Among the aims are to promote academic engagement, to build, preserve, and provide access to rich and diverse collections, to develop responsive library spaces for diverse communities, and to foster an innovative culture of learning and assessment. So the collections encompass more than 10,000 linear feet of manuscripts, rare maps, rare books, historical maps, and university archives, with a scope that ranges from local to global. The department work is both public-facing and technical, and in that regard, it has unique goals and objectives that sets it apart from other departments. The staffing in the department is 2 FTE, and that total includes me.
So my primary work involves investigating, evaluating, assessing, inventorying, and locating digital assets and documentation on the library's institutional history. I don't catalog or necessarily perform metadata work. Prior to my hire, no one was dedicated to either managing the library's institutional knowledge or its digital assets. On the left of the screen are images of my day-to-day. From left to right, my office, the sole archival quality boxes of housed CDs, and then a glimpse of our small asset storage room. On the right are actual images of our library's, quote, assets, end quote. Most content I work with are materials with no research value, and they often come from library staff events or internal communications.
And my physical work environments span 4 floors of the Melville Library. I have collections dispersed across multiple storage rooms, and then there's a reading room, a seminar room, and an office area with a processing space. So this main library building on the left is actually a building within a building, and Dana and I are located on opposite sides of it. In terms of our daily duties, there's no built-in redundancy or another colleague that can complete the unique aspects of our work. This reality has potential to create feelings of isolation or contribute to a lack of inclusivity across the organization. These bullet points on the right are a sampling of the types of work that we perform independently. So for me, there's appraisal, processing, creating finding aids, research and reference, teaching and library instruction, collection management, running events, giving lectures, facilities, donor relations, I'm the department webmaster, and publicity efforts. And for Dana, the scope of her work includes assessment, digital asset management, digital preservation, workshops and research guides, collection management, digital capacity modeling, licensing procurement, and repository audits and management.
So within the profession, being a lone arranger is subjective in how it is experienced. It can range from solitary to a sole role to even isolated. The Society of American Archivists, SAA, has 2 definitions of the lone arranger. The SAA Lone Arranger section was founded in 2003 with the mission, quote, to provide education, stimulate communication, and encourage support between archivists working in lone arranger settings. The term lone arranger includes those working alone or in a very small staff situations, end quote. The SAA dictionary also defines the term to mean, quote, an individual who is the only staff member or the only formally trained archivist working in an archives, end quote. A few examples of lone arrangers in the literature are just listed here and include Christina Zaman's book, The Lone Arranger Succeeding in a Small Repository, and Laura Frizzle's article, Journeyed Woman, a Lone Arranger on the Final Frontier, published in Provenance Journal of the Society of Georgia Archivists in 2018.
So while solitary work can be enjoyable and some people may prefer to work in isolation, others might be looking for ways to connect and collaborate. And moreover, inclusivity in DEIA best practices is an outcome that evinces a sense of belonging and engagement for employees in the workplace. So a few reasons to reimagine the lone arranger role are to 1, to transform isolation to connection. 2, there's practical reasons such as increased productivity and efficiency. And 3, to build inclusivity, trust, and higher morale. How did we reimagine the lone arranger? Well, we had 3 main strategies. The first was to craft a series of self-directed and initiated opportunities. Second, to develop shared goals and objectives. And third, to invest in and commit to mutual research and scholarship. So all of these collective activities were informed by overarching objectives. They include collection access and discoverability, policy development and documentation, academic and public engagement, collection preservation and sustainability, and inclusivity and collegiality.
One concept that we explored in our work is understanding the sociological theory of emotional labor, or EL, in the workplace. EL in this framework is not about feeling emotional when working with collections. Rather, the term emotional labor is about subverting true feelings when interacting with others in the workplace. In a lone role, especially, EL can exacerbate feelings of isolation. So these scholars, Panicos, Constanti, and Paul Gibbs, examined EL among academics, arguing they have to either, quote, conceal or manage actual feelings, end quote, for the benefit of others. For our process, we imagined their EL concept in an archival setting, with an archivist having less agency on the left and more agency on the right. On the left, we intentionally chose an obtuse isosceles triangle to illustrate imbalance between the archivist, the customer, which could be institutional administrators, students, researchers, faculty, community donors, librarians, archivists, and management, for example, archive administrators, professional organizations and standards, and archival education. Archivists can invoke radical acceptance in moments that trigger uncomfortableness. According to Marcia Linehan, radical acceptance is, quote, a conscious effort to acknowledge and honor difficult situations and emotions, end quote, by fully accepting your situation and all feelings associated with it. Radical acceptance is welcoming life on its terms and not resisting what is out of your control. We have agency in accepting and managing our situations and emotions.
So our partnership emphasizes actively supporting each other's goals and scholarship interests. We intentionally chose to integrate Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence competencies of self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills in our work. Mutually beneficial partnerships like ours can cultivate a sense of validation and anchor productive symbiotic relationships. So Goleman's influential performance model argues that personal success in work is predicated on the control, balance, and management of one's own and understanding others' emotions. EI skills have been shown to improve work performance, enhance job success, and increase satisfaction. The next series of slides are examples of our collaborations. They briefly describe the diverse projects and initiatives that we have worked on together over the past few years. So the first one is preservation benchmarking. These efforts assess the local current state of digital preservation against criteria for trusted digital repositories and integrate digital preservation best practices into it. So this here is a screenshot of the rapid benchmark assessment we conducted and that appeared in our published article about digital repository legacies. In assessment work, we've compiled and examined statistics to inform data-driven decisions. So a large part of this process has involved locating and identifying digital holdings and evaluating the scope and extent of digital collections. The bar chart figure represents this work. It depicts the sum of the library's digital assets in all repositories, websites, and virtual storage. We've also formed coherent strategies between collection development, preservation priorities, and digital initiatives. To that end, and in a completely remote environment, we co-led the project planning and implementation of the Rapid Response Collecting Initiative, quote, documenting COVID-19, Stony Brook University experiences, unquote. And just this month, we reconceptualized, procured, and deployed Archive-It for the university libraries. I've supervised interns for years, and last year I asked Dana about her interest in collaborating with me to gain supervisory experience and to make progress in a teaching requirement for tenure. Dana needs evidence of teaching to achieve tenure, but in her digital asset management role, there is no natural fit for the typical teaching done by Stony Brook librarians, which emphasizes information literacy by academic discipline. So we adapted my internship planning documents to share the hours and to develop goals and learning objectives, an action plan, a set of curated readings, and a schedule for in-person supervision and instruction of an intern.
For the past few years, Kristen and I regularly swap institutional knowledge. We're working to construct a more complete picture of the library's administrative history. I've learned really key pieces of information from her that explain past practices of managing our assets. So I'll often come across staff event photos, and then she can help me identify faces and then the item's context. And I think she finds some of the things I'm finding like really funny. And we always get a good laugh about it. So pictured here is a 1961 photo of students outside the geodesic dome classrooms. However, she told me that this is not actually located in Stony Brook, and the photo itself was mislabeled. This was taken at our first campus in Oyster Bay, New York. Often we utilize our collective skills and committee work to document and preserve institutional memory. We both serve on the Library Faculty Executive Committee and inventoried a faculty document archive. Most recently, Kristen and I formalized a new dissertation and theses collection policy and practices statement. This is part of our project to reconceptualize how the library manages electronic theses and dissertations. We've also devised workflows for daily work that emphasize documenting project tasks, communicating updates, and being flexible in scheduling ad hoc meetings. We're bridging collection management needs as formats evolve from print to digital. In 2021, Kristen and I remediated art catalogs in a local DSpace repository. We performed a collection assessment and came up with new metadata taxonomies for the collection and item level records. We collaborated in real time, and then we also used a shared Google Sheet to break up the remediation work. Pictured is a screenshot of a presentation we gave at the Southern Miss Institutional Repository Conference about the project. We both share a research interest in indigeneity and have collaborated extensively on academic engagement work, such as on a new research guide pictured here and a couple workshops. We repurposed our scholarly output into text for the guide and presented a few workshops about researching regional indigenous histories and cultures. The springboard for our collaboration was our formal mentoring assignment in 2020. All tenure-track librarians are assigned a tenured librarian. Even though I had already been working at the library for over a year, this assignment was when we really truly met each other. As a lone role, my first year was very isolated. So in our first meeting, I shared about my workplace issues and experiences to that point, and we made a decision to re-envision mentorship grounded in tenets of emotional intelligence and radically accepting workplace experiences. Finally, we've collaborated on more than 20 different research projects, culminating in publications and presentations delivered at international, national, and regional conferences and events. Some of the examples discussed today are represented in our scholarly output. We write research on a variety of topics related to our work in libraries and archives, but also in other fields of study. For example, we presented last year at a conference on the intersection of archives and emotions. We hope that sharing our varied collaboration is instructive for others seeking to transform feelings of isolation to connection in the workplace. We reimagine the Lone Ranger concept through an inclusivity lens by crafting a series of self-directed and initiated opportunities, developing shared goals and objectives, and investing in a mutual research and scholarship agenda. Extending the archival paradigm to include radical acceptance and emotional intelligence helps to reclaim agency in Lone Ranger work. While you may work in a Lone Ranger role professionally, or because of organizational structures, there can be opportunities for inclusivity within the workplace and through professional organizations such as art. Finding ways to expand your horizons with colleagues and peers can be mutually beneficial and increase collegiality and trust. Two personal outcomes from our partnership have been high morale and stronger collegial relationships. If you'd like to get in contact with us after our talk, you can email us here. Thank you again to Art and y'all for attending.
All right. Thank you so much, Dana and Kristen. That was fantastic. I love this idea of radical acceptance. I just wrote it down in like big letters in my notes and underlined it like 3 times. That's so wonderful. You're getting some really great kudos also in the Q&A box. I do want to open up this time for Q&A from the audience as well. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I actually had a question myself for you guys. So I know you mentioned that you kind of started this partnership through the mentorship program that you were assigned to one another for this. But how did you, is the mentorship program only for like a year? Is it for a longer period of time? Or did you make the conscious choice to say, no, we saw how successful this was, we're going to extend it? And if that was the case, how did you kind of sell that to upper management of like, this is a good collaboration, this leads to good things, even though we're in separate departments?
Honestly, I don't remember. I think it was just a year lease. Like, I don't even remember. I feel like I talk to Kristen every day at this point. So I couldn't tell you. I think it was just 1 year, the mentorship program.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. What happens after the first year is that it's expanded from a librarian to include academic, professors. It's really could be at the discretion of the mentee to kind of identify who might be able to speak to their portfolio of work. I'll also say that the work that we've accomplished through this partnership is all for the benefit of the library, of the organization, of the institution. So taking that initiative has certainly, like I said, reaped rewards for us here, professionally and for the organization.
Thank you. So we do have a question coming in from the Q&A. How can this type of collaboration be transferred to other disciplines?
I think, like, through the examples Kristen and I shared, we've done a lot of work for like the work we do in our separate roles that don't necessarily overlap, but then we've expanded it to be more encompassing. Like for me, for example, it's for the tenure requirements. I think for those who perhaps have a lone role in like a museum or historical society, maybe partnering with someone in the region, joining a professional organization. I think what works so great with me and Kristen is we really don't have a lot of overlap. So every time she talks, I'm like super invested and interested. Or like I'll find a photo of her in the things I'm looking at or a video, and I'll send it to her, and it like sparks a conversation. And we normally like follow that rabbit hole down and be like, oh, this was an issue I'm experiencing. And we try to just find connections of how we could work together to like benefit our own goals.
I always tell Dana every problem or issue is an opportunity to create an article or to share, share your experiences. We have to help each other out here because of, feelings of isolation. And I think also a lot of our work, it's evolved. For example, Dana's position was newly created. There's a lot of components that require maybe non-traditional areas such as computer science or data science, so I have my DAS certificate. So there's ways that we can infuse our skill sets into our collaborative work.
All right, thank you. So we have another question here. Is there any kind of like, did you create any documentation, or is there a printed example of like a roadmap that you can share for this type of collaboration? Or did it kind of just happen organically?
I think when we were preparing this presentation, Danielle, it sparked, oh, we should write about this. So it might be,
yeah.
Thank you for the inspo. We will probably start working on that shortly. But, we do have, we're very organized. We have we share a lot of Google folders for our collaborative projects, but also for mentoring. We have a whole tenure map, and we've kind of created, I think, some interesting ways to collaborate through Google Drive and other means to stay in communication all the time.
That's awesome. I think, like, honestly, I'm such a big fan of like, take whatever work you're doing and then repurpose it at least 3 more times, and then you can move on to the next thing. So it's really fantastic to hear that you have your eye on, thinking about writing this more formally. I think, based on the responses we're getting right now, people are really interested and invested in this type of creative work, and working around the systems that can sometimes initially isolate us, but then bring us together again. All right, so we'll wait, give it a couple more seconds to see if anybody else chimes in with any questions. This has been really fantastic. We appreciate you both being here and sharing this story that I find very creative and really an excellent way to work with the resources that you're given.
Thank you.
It was really fun to put this together. I think too much fun. Too much fun doing this.
And that's a good sign of like a good working partnership then, and finding a way to connect with someone who you really do share a lot of values with. All right, keep going. So come on in, folks. If you have any other questions for Dana and Kristen, we'll be happy to have them answered right now. I actually have another one. Has your collaboration inspired anyone else in your library to kind of take on this route, or is it still like just you guys kind of go on this road?
Oh, actually, I think it has actually inspired. We have a lot of leadership changes right now, a lot of interim positions, and my current interim supervisor, I think, has seen the work me and Kristen do, was super surprised by it actually. And now she's like, is kind of being like the Kristen in a way. I'm coupled with her on a lot of different work projects, not necessarily related to what I'm doing in like digital asset management.
Mm-hmm.
I think also when you're in a lone role, you just have to, have that resilience and fortitude to kind of self-initiate and to figure out how to get things done, to the best of your ability. And I think that that's appreciated too, that you can come up with creative solutions even when you may not have, a lot of flexibility in your schedule, or, there's, if you don't show up, maybe the collections aren't opened.
Yeah.
There's stresses and pressures that I think people don't understand unless you're working in this capacity. So even though Dana and I don't have identical work, the emotions or the feelings it may evoke are similar. So in that way, we can have empathy for each other in our work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, I think then in that case, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you, Dana and Kristen, again for sharing this great presentation with us. We look forward to any future work that you do on this topic. Folks, will be having our last session, second to last session of the day, technically, starting at 2:30 back in this Zoom channel again. And we're looking forward to seeing you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, it is 2:30 on the dot, so we're going to go right ahead and get started. Welcome to our 2:30 session, Addressing Archival Gaps with Library Colleagues and Community Partners, presented by Meryl Agish and Jerry Grantham. So Meryl Agish is the community coordinator of the Queens Memory Project at Queens Public Library and collaborates with library colleagues, community partners, and volunteers on participatory archiving programs and oral history interviews. She is currently pursuing her MLIS at Queens College, CUNY. Jerry Grantham is the Volunteer Services Manager at Queens Public Library and works closely with various Friends chapters to achieve their respective goals. Jerry is member at large for the New York Libraries Association Friends of Libraries section. So with that, I'm going to go right ahead and turn it on over to Jerry and Meryl. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
You're very welcome.
Hey, Jerry. Oh, your audio is not working. Okay. While we hopefully will be able to hear Jerry's lovely voice, I will go ahead and share my slides. So I'm Meryl. As Danielle was saying, I work with the Queen's Memory Project at Queens Public Library, and Jerry, who will be introducing herself very shortly, is one of my absolute favorite people on the planet and one of my absolute favorite colleagues. So we'll get into some of our collaboration and our work together in the next couple slides. Jerry, can you talk? Let's see. It's still not working. Okay.
Wait, now?
Yes, there we go.
Success!
Yes.
This would not be like a proper, presentation on a Friday afternoon without technical difficulty. So happy Friday, y'all.
Exactly. And thank you all for tuning in. One of the last things you do, hopefully, before the end of your work week. Jerry, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Yeah, I'm like all flustered now. But yes, yes, Jerry Grantham, Manager of Volunteer Services at Queens Public Library, and proud collaborator here with one of my favorite coworkers of all time, Meryl, my superstar. So yeah, we're excited to share some of the fun things we've been working on with you all.
Yeah. This image that I have on the left is pre-pandemic times. I think this was I forget the exact date, but it would have been right around this time in 2020. I was 1 month into my time at the public library. This is what I imagined my public library life was going to be like being out in the public, doing fun things. And then we know soon after what happened. Luckily, we're getting closer to what was in this 2020 image. You see in this photo with Jerry and one of the friends and the manager of Flushing, we're getting back to what things used to be like in some sense.
Slowly but surely, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So for those of you who may be unaware of what a Friends of the Library is, for our Friends of Queens Public Library, these are a special core of volunteers that we have. And they work on kind of 3 key areas for us, and that's helping to sponsor library programming and services through fundraising that they do. They conduct outreach events and kind of just really get the word out for their respective libraries and communities about what's going on, and not just within their neighborhoods and their community libraries, but also the system as well. And then they also help us spearhead advocacy campaigns. We're going to have a tough advocacy season coming up with all the, budget cuts they're talking about public libraries and stuff. So we're gearing up for a very intense spring with our friends, but they are, really invested community members who have chosen to bring their talents to us and help us kind of spread the word and get things out about the various things that are happening at Queens Public Library.
Thank you. So I'll go into some of the Queen's memory work for the next couple of slides, just to give you some background about what we were doing when we pivoted to that early 2020 period and how it's really affected, or shaped, I should say, some of the work that we've been doing since, and the ways that we've been able to expand the collaboration to work more closely with people like Jerry, as well as colleagues, more broadly across the branches. So Queen's Memory was founded back in 2010. We've recorded, on this slide, we have about 1,000 oral history interviews. I don't know what the latest count is, but it's steadily growing week by week. I think about 300 or 400 of those were recorded just in the last, approaching 3 years, when we've been able to shift a lot of our practices that were entirely in person before spring 2020 to being more virtual. We're getting back to some in-person interviews, but for the most part, our volunteers and our colleagues are recording remotely, which has been a really wonderful way to be able to connect during this time. So Queen's Memory does all kinds of things, but oral history really is at the heart of our work, sharing stories, recording people's stories, and thinking about different ways to focus our collecting efforts to make sure that we are getting a deeper record of Queens. So that can manifest in all kinds of ways. And with the Friends Legacy Project, it is getting, to some of the more specific points that we have seen. We don't have enough representation. We don't have enough memory. We don't have the records sometimes. And Jerry will definitely get more into that. But our interest is always in complicating the narrative about Queens, creating new primary resources so that people in the future, or really like next week, can listen to people's interviews and get a better understanding of what an individual has been witness to. And sometimes that may be something incredibly historically significant. I think for everyone who's been living in the pandemic, we're all living historically significant lives. So we're not just interviewing, the people who you may expect to be in an oral history collection. We're really focusing on, I met somebody at the bus stop and suddenly I'm in a conversation with them and I'd like to record an interview with them. It can be something, quite casual like that. So in the spring of 2020, as we all recall, when things were shutting down locally, just in that week, I think a week or two before, I and Jerry were sitting at one of the tables stuffing packets for the upcoming Friends conference that would have been Saturday before the shutdown happened. Yep. So we were totally on track to do all kinds of things that, slowly started to ramp down. And then when it became clear nothing was going to continue as we were familiar with, we at Queen's Memory were thinking, Queens at that time was the epicenter of the epicenter. We were seeing the effects of the pandemic right outside our doors, on our streets, our neighbors, our friends, our families. And as an archive for the people of Queens, we were thinking about, well, how do we expand the work that we do and offer a place for people to process what they're experiencing? And that was operating on a number of different ways. We had a crowdsourced effort where we were inviting people, please share your story with us if you feel comfortable. That could be in text, as video, as photos, or if they would like to do oral history interviews, we shifted our model to be able to record online, and we kind of figured out a lot as we went along. But oral history, especially that first year, it became a way for people to really come to us and connect and find ways to just be heard and listen to each other. And that year, there were hundreds of people coming through, being interested in getting familiar with oral history or volunteering to be interviewed themselves. So this was, a tremendous year of growth. And I don't want to ever revisit those circumstances, but it was a year that we were able to just be really innovative and flexible and focused on how do we serve the community in the way that we can when we can't actually even be next to each other. So I had been hired in December 2019 to launch the Queen's Memory Ambassadors Program, which would have been a training program with a group of selected libraries. It would be librarian-led around projects that people wanted to lead over the course of the year. So we were imagining, in-person trainings at Central and Jamaica. The librarians would come, and anyone else at the branches who would want to help out. Of course, there are non-librarians as well in the locations who are helping out, volunteers in some instances, Friends group members, people who were just like the super patrons of that particular site. And this was set to launch in April 2020. It did not. We had to just put that on kind of an indefinite pause. But then through that earlier 2020 experience, seeing, this is working, we're trying to find ways to match people, to teach our methods to people who would like to do this for their own projects or for Queen's Memory. And so we launched a virtual version. And for our library staff who participated, they gave us really great feedback about this was a time when their day-to-day was very different than what it is now or what it was before the pandemic. And it was a time when they were cycling, I think 2 teams per location, and then they would be home and they had a way to stay connected with people in their neighborhoods that they served, and just stay connected with each other and have something to focus on during times when they otherwise may not have had too much work to look to, which I know is like the overwhelm of work that sometimes we add to our plates that Jerry and I are very familiar with. But at that time, I found that in conversation with our colleagues, they appreciated having some way to continue the work that they did when they couldn't, have a casual conversation with somebody who was coming through. And then with the help of many people, including our friends groups and Jerry, the librarians recorded, I think about 60 interviews between the different groups. Many of them are available on our aviary platform. This is just a brief assortment of interviews, but the locations were covering, all parts of Queens. There were 10 groups that participated. There were 5 groups that participated the following year, reaching a couple of other neighborhoods that we had not connected with during the first cohort. And I believe a couple of people who were interviewed by the ambassadors were friends group members currently or had been in the past. Yes. And so it became this bridge of, the friends were really invested in their locations, and they are, of course, still, I don't want to say were, and they had those neighborhood connections that sometimes the local staff may not have. So they really have started to help get the word out and, seed the projects more broadly in their communities. Okay, I'm almost done with my portion. And then in March 2021, to mark the library's 125th year, we kind of gathered all the stuff that we had learned, especially in the previous year, and figured out ways to create a very simple script, 1-pager for staff to use to interview each other, or for volunteers to use to interview QPL colleagues or other people who are part of our community. And that became this institutional collection that is ongoing. Our anniversary year ended, but it was clear there are a lot of people, I think, in many of our local public library systems who have been with, in some cases, their location for a very, very long time, or have been with the library system in different departments, different divisions for a very, very long time. And the idea of when that person departs for a different job or for retirement, all of the memories and that knowledge that they have go with them. And this would be a way to just try and record a little bit. And even for colleagues who are much younger, who perhaps are newcomers, who are earlier in their career, it was that same appreciation of the work that people do, and a way to record what the day-to-day life has been like for them, what are significant achievements for them in their careers so far, and just a way for us to give a deeper sense of what the library means to the people who work within it or work alongside it. Again, a couple of images here of some of our colleagues.
Yes, and with that, we will launch into what has become kind of a little bit of a passion project of mine, the Friends Legacy Project. And so around that same kind of time when, the library, we started to celebrate our 125th anniversary, to me, I was thinking, well, what can we do for the Friends Network? How can we kind of help, pay homage to the system and kind of look back on, the history of the Friends? And as I was kind of exploring and making inquiries to, our some of our colleagues and trying to check the archives and stuff, I realized with horror that we did not really have any historical records on the history of the Friends of Queens Public Library. And I said, well, this will not stand. We are a library. We are supposed to have records of things. And so, I collaborated with Meryl and some other colleagues in Queen's Memory and said, please, what are your best practices? Help me, like, how can we, do this and make this kind of a fun project? And so it kind of became a call out to present Friends members, members who had been, maybe active in the past, and the word kind of spread organically throughout, members talking to one another, that what we'd like to do is record either oral histories or collect photos and different print materials that maybe members had, to just really kind of come up with the different history of our groups. We have had over maybe 35 to 40 different Friends chapters active at different periods across Queens. And so it has been very much so a labor of love, just reaching out and doing these interviews with different members, as well as, being put in contact with people who, like I said, aren't even active anymore. I had the pleasure of interviewing a woman who told me, I just wanted to come and bring you these things because if I didn't tell our story, who would? And so, it's one of those things where we're preserving the deep work that they've had put into, serving their communities and their libraries and all the different fun programs that they would run, and just these deep community, events that these Friends groups were helping to usher into libraries. And they really kind of have become like the community centers in a lot of their neighborhoods. And very much so the Friends are kind of that bridge between our staff and our patrons, and people who would maybe necessarily never come to the library became involved because of different Friends groups. And so it has just been, like I said, a slow labor of love with getting people to come on. A lot of our members tend to skew older adults. And so again, when I launched this, it was, they weren't comfortable meeting in person, but they didn't necessarily want to get on Zoom and record with me, or, some of them they're a little camera shy. And so, it was a lot of, calling in favors and like, let's just make this easy and a conversation. And it's just really been a joy for me to kind of just hear the different things that have happened in the past, especially since, I'm not originally from Queens. And so it's very much so always just like a nice kind of learning experience for me to hear about these different things. And, we have such rich neighborhoods with deep histories, and just find out all these different stories. And, one of my favorite interviews was, I was very lucky that my predecessor, who had been with the library for almost 30 years, kept meticulous records, and is a member of the Friends Network in her retirement. And so I said, can I do an interview? And she did not want to be on camera, did not want to do an interview, but said, like, give me a month, and we'll get together. And so we scheduled this meeting, and she comes in with a 5-inch binder that was in chronological order with pictures and flyers and newsletters dating back to when I was in elementary school. And so it was just a very, kind of aha moment to me, that like, there's so much in here, and, just all these groups that, aren't even in existence anymore, but who started them, and the neighborhoods and the managers at that time. And, again, we've had these community members just holding on to these, different things throughout the years, and they've been contacting me and giving them. And so we're getting them with the help of Queen's Memory, Meryl and her awesome team, helping us get these things, put into the archives, so that, Friends groups in the future can look back and see, what used to happen in their neighborhood.
And that 5-inch binder, I saw it a few months ago. It is amazing. I mean, the archiving that goes along, we're at an archivist conference, but just like some of the archiving that you see that people have taken upon themselves. Can you talk a little bit, Jerry, about some of the materials that Lynn had in that mega binder?
Absolutely. I think my favorite one was that the Richmond Hill Friends had this amazing fundraiser where they have, I guess, like these like really kind of grand houses in the neighborhood. And so they had an artist who had sketched, kind of all the different mansions in the neighborhood, and these people in the community had opened up their houses for tours in the neighborhood and were charging a small fee. And that fee was going to the Friends group to help support programs at the library. And it was just like this very rich program of come and check out the neighborhood and see the historical houses in the neighborhood and get to learn more about the neighborhood, but support your library. And it was just like, this is amazing. And we would never do this now, but like just like really fun, innovative things that they were doing like in the early 90s as like fundraisers or just kind of like simple little get-togethers, come and have coffee at the branch and meet your librarian, and just like very kind of like cute little things like that. But yeah, that's probably my favorite one though, the Richmond Hill tour thing. Yeah.
I really love I think it was was it St. Albans where they had the essay contest at the local school?
Yes, that was
and
another
just
one.
seeing, this list of names and the photos that go with it, all these cute little kids, so proud. And that, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like early 1990s or like mid 90s, maybe.
That's what it was, because the St. Albans Friends were a bunch of retired educators. And so they had come up with this essay contest for the local elementary schools in the neighborhood. And so there was like a writing prompt, and they were always kind of, like, what does the library mean to you? Something like that. They worked with the schools. And so it was like all the third graders and fourth graders wrote these essays, and, all these retired teachers graded them. And then they would go and do a ceremony. They would have a ceremony at the library. And the winners got certificates and trophies, and their local electeds would come. And I think our CEO at the time came, and it was like just like this very rich thing. And it's just, again, this is just a group of volunteers that got together and wanted to do something to kind of help empower the kids and make them feel special. And when, speaking with one of the members who had helped start that essay contest, that's what she said. She's like, the reason we went and got, the certificates and the little, trophies and stuff is we wanted the kids to know that like their work was important and valued, and that they had done such a good job with their writing. And so again, it's so much bigger than, I just come to my library, or this isn't like necessarily like a group where we just kind of hang out and talk. Like they were really trying to make impact in their communities and kind of foster, a love of learning and literacy within the youth and the community. And they're just like all these very rich kind of different, very moving stories about things that they were able to do that, typically librarians wouldn't have the time to do or be able to do, have the wherewithal to do. So, it was always just like this very nice extension of, the library to the community with the Friends groups.
Yeah. Oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
So this upcoming semester, we have a regular collaboration with one of the graduate classes at St. John's. Usually it's an oral history class, sometimes it's public history. This semester it's oral history, and the 15 students will be connected with one of our QPL colleagues for their like assignment for the semester. And just thinking through the list of people, somebody like Ruth, I think, is going to be interviewed, and is she the longest serving QPL employee, right?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Like 50 plus year
like 50 plus years.
Yeah. And then another colleague who's more recently hired as a trainee, a librarian trainee at Jackson Heights, she's also being interviewed. She's somebody who came to the library world, a bit later in her career, and she has, a lot to share about what brought her to library school, but she's a relatively new QPL person. So I think,
is it Amy?
Yes, Amy.
I got hired with Amy. We were customer service supervisors together.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, perfect. So I'd love to, and one day, Jerry, I'm going to interview you too.
Yeah.
But, thinking about how these projects can take on different forms. So, working with academic partners to do some of that interviewing, because we found sometimes colleagues were really comfortable interviewing each other. And oh my goodness, I think the interviews between Ms. Olga and Ms. Pat are just amazing.
Yeah.
They this is a library pair, manager and assistant manager,
Yeah.
and they are, you can tell, like long time friends, and just they are family to each other, and they loved interviewing each other. Others were a little bit reluctant to interview each other. It felt like we may touch on things, even though all the questions were very much about like your time at the library, but they just felt like, I'm okay just keeping my distance a little bit, which I get too. That's totally understandable. So sometimes we look to, we have an active volunteer base, but also looking at academic partners who may be able to help record some of the interviews when our staff, who this is something that they take on addition to their day-to-day. So if they aren't able to get to it for any reason, but they would like to be interviewed, we try to find ways to do that interview recording. And Jerry, for how things have been more recently, for the people who want to be interviewed, is it still like, Jerry, I'm only going to be interviewed by you, or do they seem open to possibly being interviewed by others?
I think right now it's still like it has to be me. I have very special relationships with my friends members. So, I mean, even like the photo on this slide, this is Michaeline. She's the president of the Ridgewood Friends. And I remember like I had launched the project, and nobody signed up. Like it was just like crickets. Nobody wanted to do it. And so, I think one day Michaeline had called me for something and I said, listen, I'm going to guilt you into doing a legacy interview with me. Be my first person to do an interview. And so she did. And it turned into, it wasn't just about like her experience with the Friends. It was also kind of a love letter to the library and the Ridgewood community, because like, she told this beautiful story about how one of her earliest memories was her father bringing her to the Ridgewood Library for a book sale, and how that's when she found out that women could write, scary books, horror books, when she found Frankenstein and Mary Shelley, and how that just turned into her love of reading. And so, it just was like this very personal kind of love letter from her about like her love of her father and how he would be the one to bring her to the library. And I remember like we had like wrapped up the interview, and I was like trying to hold it together because I'm an emotional person. It doesn't take much to make me cry. And so like I stopped recording, and I'm just like, oh, I had to hold it together, but that was so beautiful, and thank you for sharing. And then like, in a couple minutes, her and I are just like crying on the Zoom, because it was just like, oh, that was so beautiful, the stories you shared, and like all these different things. And so, it's so much more sometimes than just like, oh, like this is what I've done for the library. It's like, like I said, just really like these deep personal like kind of love stories about how like the library's been a staple in their lives. And so now here it is that she's the president of the Friends group at Ridgewood, and leading things. And like on Halloween, they gave out treat bags and, brand new books that were, like Goosebump books and all this other stuff. And like, I took my kids in their Halloween costume to go to Ridgewood and like go see them, kind of thing. And so it's just, again, we're building those memories for the next generation, right? So gotta love it.
Oh, library stuff. So we still have plenty of time for questions, and I think Jerry and I can keep talking for sure if there aren't many. But we'll share these. Let me see if I have okay. I'll get the link in a moment and share it in the chat, so that everyone watching, if you're interested, you can click through the different links and you can see. I'll show the script that we've been using that we've adapted for more institutional history at QPL, and also for the Friends Legacy Project, the script that was developed from this. And Jerry then added a lot more questions that touch on exactly what you're saying right now about like the meaning of being right, that may not have that professional. So hopefully this will open. So we made it intentionally super simple. Our usual oral history process has a few more steps. It is typically more complicated, and it's more open-ended, like it's more wide-ranging in most cases, and we don't typically share a list of questions with people ahead of time. Sometimes we do. For this one, it felt appropriate that people could start to prepare when they were invited and think about, okay, how am I going to answer this question? I know I'm going to be asked it. So we adjusted the terms. We typically use a Creative Commons 4.0 license. I forget the exact name, but you can find it on the Queen's Memory website. For this, we adjusted those terms so that it would be a bit more straightforward, I believe, for use as part of like this institutional history collection and potentially as part of the QPL 125 campaign that now has spun off into a like what QPL means to me approach to the project, and for Jerry's project as well, being adapted for the Friends Legacy project in particular. And so the person who's interviewing, if they were in person, but most of them were recorded online, often on StreamYard, a program that we use for streaming programs, but it's also a standalone recording platform. So if somebody doesn't want to deal with Zoom or WebEx, WebEx from the earlier days, that we were able to help them out on the Queen's Memory side of things. So, you know, two colleagues may just join in web browsers wherever they happen to be that day. And then myself or one of my colleagues would help with the recording, which is basically like we hit record, they can go on with the interview. And then once they're done, we stop recording and share the file. So we do the same for our volunteers or for other people who are interviewing as well. It's a great tool. So if anyone's looking for something that's like Zoom, but is easier, highly recommend StreamYard. And then the interview itself could go in different directions, but these were the 5 framing questions that we were encouraging people to ask. Not every interview covered all of these or any of, there are some that just went in their own direction, which is totally fine too. And then at the end, we asked people if they felt comfortable to give a little shout out to Happy Anniversary Queens Public Library, which was going to be part of a compilation at the end of the year. And then the upload form, which yes, it's still up. So now it's adapted to QPL stories. What does Queens Public Library mean to you? This is built on Airtable, and for our processing team, it's super easy. We have many bases on the back end for all the different things that Queen's Memory does. And if somebody was, wanted to write a brief paragraph about what QPL means to them, they can use the same, or a photo or whatever it may be, they can use the same form. And for people who are recording interviews, they can use it as well. And then we just organize it on the back end. And if it's linked to a particular library, they're able to choose which of the branches their story is connected to. And then here we have the consent language repeated, and then submit. And we follow up with whatever the next steps may be. If it's approving a transcript in some cases, or if we have questions about something, our team will be in touch. And for Jerry's interviews as well, using the same kind of approach so that it is not existing in all kinds of different places. Hopefully most of our interviews use the same kind of intake so that the people who are working on it on the processing side have everything in front of them when they need to be handling the different digital files. So it makes our lives, for Jerry and myself and the others who are more on the front end of things, simpler, that there are these specific places where the files can go. Okay, looking at the Q&A, I see Jose asked, with respect to the oral history interviews, does the person who is being interviewed sometimes bring photos, movies, documents, etc.? Jerry, you want to talk about?
Yeah, I was like, absolutely. My favorite get at an interview was a very old Friends of the Library mug. It was just like, I'm going to take this. I can't put it in the archives. It's in my kitchen cabinet, but it's a great, it was a great find. But yes, very much so, especially with the Friends Legacy interviews. A lot of them, they have, pictures, which is very nice. Of course, sometimes, a lot of the times, unfortunately, they can't necessarily identify everybody in the photos. But we still do have them. Like I said, I've gotten newsletters, flyers, kind of the gamut from the friends of them just bringing raw materials to the interviews as well, and things that they just want to donate to the archives, which has been really nice, just to kind of see like the library's old logos and taglines changing through the years as well. It's been fun to kind of see.
I'm gonna look for the link so I'm just going to stop sharing the screen for a minute too, but one of our colleagues, Adrienne Hawthorne, who's a librarian at Cambria Heights, she's been involved with Queen's Memory from before my time. She had brought a bunch of different programs to her location. She's really interested in that community history and local history, and really like finding ways to make it really lively. And that active connection to the past. She, in a lot of her interviews, has asked the people, please share photos with me if you're able to ahead of time. And then she makes a slideshow for them to talk through the images so that they're on the screen together. And she has her slideshow, and she's able to, include that visual in the interview itself. I think, I'm trying to remember, I think some of the images were scanned and also deposited alongside the interview, but that's one way also that people are bringing in some of those other materials that they would like to use. And often people will bring photos or other records that relate to their interview, and they want to add it to the interview record so that we have anything that kind of, it's its own little bundle. And we're a digital archive, so anything that comes to us, if it's not already digitized, we help with that process and then give everything back to the people, to the person who's contributing that material, so that they get to hold on to the original photos or videos or whatever it may be that they'd like to add alongside their interview. Let me find this link while I remember right now.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions? Let's see.
Oh, I'm back just to say thank
Yeah.
you for everything that you guys just put into this presentation and to this incredible project with so much labor. I know Rachel Harrison is also here. She's going to be helping out with the Q&A as well. So if any folks in the audience have any questions, please go ahead and put those in. But I actually have a question about, some of the ways that you mentioned, Jerry, in particular, trying to really tease out folks, trying to get them to come and get them to talk to you and all of that kind of stuff. So, do you have any recommendations for people about, what are some of the best practices at putting people at ease, or if there are any accommodations that you've ever had to make for people when you're doing these interviews? Or Meryl, if you've encountered this in your work with the community members, I would love to hear more about that.
Okay, well, I think for me, just because of the nature of my relationship with the friends and that I manage all of the groups, and so I do kind of have my own personal relationships with them, I've very much so been able to kind of leverage that and to be like, won't you do this for me because you love me and you want to help me with this thing that I'm doing, kind of thing has kind of really been, I'm just, like I said, I've been guilting people. This is a horrible story, but I'll share it. One of my groups, they didn't want to do individual interviews. So I said, we'll do a group interview. And we were supposed to do it, and they canceled the meeting. I think maybe some people were feeling under the weather. And then regrettably, one of their members passed away. And so at the next meeting, it was, well, you see, this is why it's important for us to not keep putting this off. Like, I don't want to be morbid, but like, I want you all's story to be on record. I want these things to be preserved for the future. Like, now do you see why it's important? And so now they're like, okay, got it. Like, they're going to do the interview now. So like, sometimes it takes kind of like those hard truths to be like, this is why this is important. Like, I want people to know like the work that you all have put in, these rich stories that we want to tell. And like I said, like, I have the president of the Kew Gardens Hills Friends, she's in her 90s. I don't have her interview yet, but I'm going to get her interview. Like, if I have to go to her house, I'm going to get her interview, because like, she's a dynamic woman. She loves the library, and I know that she has like stories to tell. And so like, it is my mission to get these stories like recorded, because like, they're important and they need to be preserved.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the age and time pressure, you don't want to, It's hard. I just interviewed a 95-year-old woman over the weekend, and not for Queen's Memory, it was for a different thing, but there's always that consideration of, I would really love to interview you before it's too late. You don't want to necessarily frame it in that way, but the implication is probably there when you're approaching people who are, quite up there in years. But just, a general approach often when people, if we invite somebody and they, are a little uncomfortable, or they say, well, I've had a totally ordinary life, what would I possibly talk about? And what I often try to emphasize is nobody else can talk about your life like you can. Even when you think about in a single family, there may be several siblings. They're all going to have very different stories about their upbringing, about their childhood. They're not going to have the same story that's repeated, each one. And so for an individual, maybe emphasizing some aspect of their life that you'd like to hear more about. Maybe it's their migration story, or their start in their career, or what it was like being a child at this point in history, whatever it is, just to emphasize, like, I'm curious about that, and I'd like to spend some time with you, and I'd like to hear more about that. And sometimes people will still say, like, no, I don't think this is for me, which, understood, not everybody is up for this kind of thing, but I think showing your interest and your curiosity will often help make the ask a little bit easier. It's not guaranteed for success, but it's one way to try to like calm somebody's nerves if they're just a little bit anxious about doing something like this.
And you know what? That reminded me, Meryl, of something that I ended up doing because I had another member who was just very adamant that she did not want to be interviewed.
Mhm.
And what we ended up doing was launching kind of an award for the Friends last year. And so she was one of my initial recipients. And so what I did was a print interview with her. And so like I have that record of her time because
Mhm.
while she was not comfortable, she was not going to do an oral history with me. She did not want to be interviewed, but she would answer those questions in an email for me. And so I do
Mhm.
have the history that way. So maybe it's just finding a different medium that people are comfortable with as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it on over to Rachel now.
So a question just came in. Have you thought of creating a book that includes your interviews and photos? It would be historical and interesting for people to read.
Well,
That would be great.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. I think, not to add another thing on your plate, Jerry, but that would be such a great project for the Friends Legacy Project down the line, not something
Yeah.
that's imminent, but I think that would be such a perfect collection to make into a book for the, however many interviews at Queen's Memory, the 1,000, whatever. Yeah, I could see a book just making it be, oral history of Queens. Some of this other projects, there's a whole, because we are co-administered by Queen's College, there's a whole collection of alumni and faculty interviews that potentially could be a book. So when you start thinking and looking to the collection as a whole, there are some that pop out, Friends Legacy Project for sure. And then others, it may be interesting to think, what kind of book could emerge? Maybe narratives about childhood, or again, like people's migration stories, because in Queens, so many people have, if not their own, immediate, but if they're first generation, they have a story that is very recent that they can talk about, or if they're immigrants, like so many people in Queens, that comes up in so many interviews. So potentially, thank you for the idea.
Yeah, no. And I will say that originally with the Friends Legacy Project, what I wanted to do was actually kind of like a program just to kind of display the history of the Friends and kind of help to celebrate them and just kind of show them off during October is when we celebrate National Friends of the Libraries Week across the nation. And so that was my original goal. I don't have like the scope of interviews I want yet. So it's like, it's off in the distance, but I love the book idea as well. So like Meryl said, yes, thank you for that. But yeah, we're definitely going to do some type of program, something with all of these interviews. I don't just want them to, be in the archives. I want to do something and show them off as well.
Or put together some sort of exhibit, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like a thing that should be very public and
Mhm.
bring people in. And share with them?
That's something that we should talk about, Jerry.
Yeah, it's like new project, Meryl.
Add more work to your plate.
Exactly. But when you're working with people you like to work with, it makes it
it's fun.
that much better. Yeah, it makes it fun. Just thinking about some other ways, it wasn't an interview installation necessarily, but 2 years ago, we connected with the Queen's COVID Remembrance Day Committee. They were doing an in-person memorial event in May of 2021. Many of the committee members had lost loved ones earlier in the pandemic at a time when they were not able to gather or to mark those losses. So they had this very big public event at Forest Park. And I believe This American Life maybe did a story on it. I haven't gone back to listen, but I'm pretty sure they were there. And then in the following year, they weren't going to host a similar kind of big public program, but we were in touch with them and thinking about, well, how about we do an installation at, in this case, it was at the Elmhurst branch, because they have this very big glass front that you can see pieces that are installed on either side. So you're on the inside, you can see one part of the installation, on the outside, you can see it from the sidewalk. And so that was this installation of portraits of different people who had, been lost and who had a personal connection to the organizing committee and, people who were part of this group. And then there was a call for people to also add memorial items in, perhaps a spoken story or a text story. So it's not oral history, but it was a way to get something that's in the collection out into the public and to then use that as a way to invite people to add more other elements that may not be part of this installation to the archive as well. So it was a way to mark, this memorial space, even though it was a temporary thing that was at Elmhurst for just a month or so.
Mhm.
And then seeing the traveling installation, traveling exhibit. Yeah, we're digital, so we can do all kinds of digital projects, which is not always the easiest thing either, but there are different ways that we share out the interviews in the collection, and we think about different ways to get it out into the community. So on those slides, you have links to Jerry's project, to the Friends group page, the Queen's Memory page, and the different scripts that we have. So if anyone has questions about how to do something like this at your institution, public library or otherwise, please get in touch. We're happy to talk.
Okay, well, if no one has any more questions, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm excited to look into some of those links. And yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, this is great.
Thank you again, Meryl and Jerry. This was so illuminating and fabulous. So we appreciate you being here today. Folks, we have one more session left. It's going to be a short one. Starting at 3:30, we'll just have our closing session with more information about Archivist Roundtable itself and ways to get involved. So we hope to see you there. But for now, go ahead, take a little break, stretch out, get some water, get some coffee, do what you need to do on this Friday afternoon, and we'll see you back here at 3:30.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Yes, enjoy.